All right, then, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Peace and power and elevation be to all of you. This your girl Tiffany, and I'm here live in the fade. So I'm gonna talk about this term called egregore. So what is egregore and how does it influence us? All right. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and get into the definition of the term. Well, before I get into the definition, I want to explain to you guys why I decided to do this subject. So someone put in my previous video, well, put a comment in my previous video when I was talking about the Abrahamic religion. And they brought up the concept about the egregore. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, this is a tongue twisting word. So I'm gonna go ahead and read what this person wrote in the comment section. Someone put, I like your video. Okay. And they also put, if someone is practicing any religion, they are practicing egregore of that religion. Egregore basically means thought form. If an African American practicing Islam, he or she is basically practicing Arabianism. If an African American is practicing Christianity, he or she is basically practicing Italianism. If an African American is practicing Judaism, he or she is practicing Asianism. Each religion has a thought form. All religion have all a religion has a egregore. The thought form is the key. So voodoo has an African thought form. Yoruba has an African thought form. Naturuism has an African thought form. An African egregore thought form. All right, so now let's go back to what they were saying about Christianity is Italianism. So really Christianity is a combination of both Greek and Roman influence, right? With Hebrew as well. Okay, so it wouldn't be necessary in Italianism. But if we want to talk about the origin of all the Abrahamic religion, where it came from the concept of Zoroastrianism. Okay, Zoroastrianism is the polytheism religion that was practiced in the early Middle Eastern time period, and today was known as Iran. Okay, so it's still around, but that's where the three main school of thoughts came from. So all of them started off as polytheism. If you study about pre-Islam, it started off as polytheism. If you study about Judaism, that's polytheism from its preconception. If you study Christianity, it's a form of polytheism. This is why people have to study Gnosticism and occultism and mysticism when it comes to these Abrahamic religion, and not just study them from how they were taught in the books. Okay. And peace to everybody in the chat. Shout out to the chat. Thank y'all for coming through. Thank y'all for coming through, brothers. But yeah, if you study the Gnosticism, it will make more sense as to how it was in the beginning. Because all these schools of thoughts started off as spirituality. Okay. It was their way of connecting with nature or making some sense out of nature, understanding the natural phenomenon. That's how it was. Even science has its roots in spirituality, okay, before it became modern science. Because again, you're trying to understand the natural phenomenon. And how do you explain it? You use the concept of mythology to explain the natural phenomenon. All right? Okay, so now let's get into the concept of egregore or egore. All right. Again, this word is kind of tongue twisting. But anyways, so let's look at what the meaning of this word is. Okay. So according to what I had looked up, so I had to take notes while I was looking this word up. It said the term ego. Let me slow down. Egregore or egore. So the term egore means watcher or waitful, right? Which also means which means thought form. So this word can be found in the occultism that speaks on angels influencing beings by watching over them. Okay. These beings are taking on the thoughts that are angelic or the thoughts of those angels that's watching over them. So the word itself comes from the Greek origin egregoros and the French word egregore. So therefore, it is the occult concept which represents the non-physical entity that comes from the collective thoughts of a certain group of people. This can be found in Wikipedia. So you can look that term up. So basically, it's the occult concept which represents the non-physical entity, right? That comes from the collective thoughts of a certain group of people. Okay. So going back to that person's comment, we would have to get away from if you make that argument about the concept, right, using this terminology, then it cannot just only be used in the sense of religion. Okay, you would have to deal with it from a social standpoint and a cultural standpoint. So now let me show y'all an article real fast. Well, I want to show y'all a couple of articles. Watch this. So here's one article that goes into the terminology, right? All right, so what is Egregore? So the term Egregore originate from a Latin word meaning wakeful. The term was coined in the late 19th century by French occultist Eliphas Levi. So egregores have their roots in the ancient Greek and Oriental cultures. It was for example featured in the book of Enoch. So the term egregore as a group thought form was developed in works of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and the Rosicrucians. So for those of you that don't know about the Rosicrucians, those people were like the earliest form of individuals who studied what we call today New Thoughts movement or New Thoughts ideology. Okay. So they dealt with a lot of mysticism, occultism, and whatnot. So one of them who I did a video on, his name was Pascal Beverly. So Pascal Beverly was a Rosicrucian himself. So he dealt with a lot of cultism and mysticism or whatnot. Okay. But anyways, so the thought of a group of people, so the concept of the egregores is used to describe a thought form that is created when people come together with a common interest and focus their energy on it. So these thought forms are made of the thoughts, ideas, and feelings that the group inadvertently sent out through their collective group mind or collective consciousness. That keyword, collective consciousness, we gonna build on that in a moment. All right, but watch this. It is hard to create one on purpose because they are often unintentional. So the purpose of the purpose of an egregore is not necessary to be a leader, but more like a spokesperson for a group or organization. It can be seen as an extension of the group's collective ego. Egregores are symbols, ideas, or ideas that exist in the collective psyche of a group of people and are thought to have a autonomous existence. So egregores are important because they provide a sense of belonging and identity. They also provide structure for beliefs. When an egregore is powerful, it can take action on its own and benefit the group. An example is the egregore created by the People's Temple at Jonestown in 1978. So for those of you that don't know about the People Temple, Jonestown, that was an organization that was founded by Jim Jones. Jim Jones was the man that had everybody drinking the Kool-Aid. So I did do a video about the massacre. However, YouTube took my video down, and I ain't like that shit. YouTube took my video down because I spent too much time trying to get all that information together. And yeah, YouTube took it down. But anyways, I did a video on that subject. However, that is an example of egregore. Okay. Now, in the article, it mentions about collective consciousness. All right, now what you heard or what you just read right there is the definition from the occult standpoint. Okay, from the occult standpoint and from the spiritual standpoint. Now let's get into thought form real quick. Let's get into thought form real quick. All right, so thought form is dealing with any of a set of presupposition or fundamental ideas which define the thinking of people of a given region time period, right? Spiritualism, a manifestation of the thoughts, ideas, or emotion of someone, it is believed to be able to be sensed by people and take physical form within the spiritual world. Okay? Now that's the definition of thought form. All right. So before I continue, going back, if you make the argument that a person who practice any religion, whether it be Abrahamic or Eastern religion, take on the thought forms of those who were the originators, right, or the culture where it came from, then you still have to argue that in general. You have to make the general argument. Now, I do agree that these religion that our people particularly currently practice come from other cultures, right? Come from those places, from the Middle East, from Asia, from the Europeans. I agree with that. Okay. But what I also mentioned is the syncretism. So there is a lot of syncretism that you see. So those people, the people that's practicing these religions, they're not just practicing it from the organic standpoint or how it was in the beginning. What they're doing is putting their cultural ideology upon that as well. And see, this is something that people have to pay attention to. When folks practice religion, right, they don't always practice it in its purest form of how it was in the beginning. They add on some ideas or some tradition to make it more comfortable and more suitable for them so they can be able to have the cultural element as well as the spiritual element. And people been doing that for ages. Okay? People been doing it for ages. You know what I'm saying? Cultures always influence other culture. So, give an example right here in the United States, right? If you make the argument of Egregore, you might as well include yourself into this conversation because by us being in the United States, we are so influenced by the Western culture. We're influenced by the Western culture and ideology. Yes, we might have created or syncretized it, but at the end of the day, the influence that we have as far as how we eat, how we dress, and the social norms or whatnot, they come from the Western culture. And their ideology goes back to the Roman and Greek philosophy, which is Roman Greco. Okay, it goes back to those time period. So, like the government system that we live in, which is called democracy, where did that come from? That came from the Greeks because the Greeks had their own form of democracy, right? Which was similar to ours. However, it was direct democracy. So they take on a lot of the philosophies from these philosophers such as Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, you name them. A lot of those Roman and Greek philosophy plays an influence on our culture, even in science. If you study science very closely, right, you pay closely attention, and all those terminology that you hear, especially when you talk about planets, when you talk about measurements and all that, where did that really come from? The Europeans, right? They used the European nomenclatures. And when they talk about the planets, the names of the planets come from the nomenclature of the Roman and Greek gods. This is where you have to go back into the concept of astrotheology, because astrotheology deals with what? The concept of worshiping the stars, the cosmos. Okay? That's what astrotheology deals with. So you have to go back into that root. All right? Now, I want to get into the sociology of this. This is where the sociology comes into play. Okay? So we're going to talk about collective consciousness. Then we're going to bring the psychology along with this. All right? So let's look at what is collective consciousness from a sociological standpoint. And I want you guys to follow me because I'm making a transition from the spiritual occultism, right? And I'm bringing it to the sociological and psychological standpoint. So let's get into collective consciousness. All right, so let's look at it. The concept of collective consciousness. What is this and how it holds society together? Watch this. This came out on January 16 of 2019 by Nikki Lisa Cole, PhD. Collective consciousness. Sometimes collective conscious is a fundamental sociological concept that refers to the set of shared beliefs, ideas, attitudes, and knowledge that are common to a social group or society. The collective consciousness informs our sense of belonging and identity in our behavior. Founding sociologist Emile Durkheim developed this concept to explain how unique individuals are bound together in collective units like social groups and society. Now, it goes down to say how collective consciousness holds society together. What is it that holds society together? This was a central question preoccupied Durkheim as he wrote about the new industrial society of the 19th century. By considering the document habits, customs, and beliefs in traditional and primitive society, comparing those to what he saw around him in his own life, Durkheim crafted some of the most important theories in sociology. He concluded that society exists because unique individuals feel a sense of solidarity with each other. This is why we can form collectives and work together to achieve community and functional society. The collective consciousness, or conscious collective, as he wrote in French, is the source of this solidarity. Okay, so Durkheim first introduced his theory of the collective consciousness in his 1893 book, The Division of Labor in Society. Later, he would also rely on the concept in other books, including Rules of Sociological Methods, Suicide, and the Elementary Forms of Religious Life. In this text, he explains that the phenomenon is the totality of beliefs and sentiments common to the average member of a society. Durkheim observed that in traditional or primitive society, religious symbols, discourse, beliefs, and ritual foster the collective consciousness. In such cases where social groups were quite homogeneous, not distinct by race or class, for example, the collective consciousness resulted in what Durkheim termed a mechanical solidarity, in effect, an automatic binding together of people into a collective through their shared values, beliefs, and practices. Okay? Now, let's see. So it goes down to say, in cases such as these, religion still play an important role in producing collective consciousness among groups of people affiliated with various religions, but other social institutions and structures will also work to produce the collective consciousness necessary for this more complex form of solidarity. And rituals outside of religion would play important roles in reaffirming it. Okay? And then it goes down to talk about social institution. So it says social institution produce collective consciousness. These other institutions include the state, which foster patriotism and nationalism, news and popular media, which spreads all kinds of ideas and practices from how to dress to who to vote for, how to date and be married. Education, which mold us into complaining citizen and workers, or compliant citizen and workers, excuse me. The police and judiciary, which shape our notion of right and wrong and direct our behavior through threat or actual physical force, among others. Rituals that serve to reaffirm the collective conscious range from parades and holiday celebrations to sporting events, weddings, grooming ourselves according to gender norms, and even shopping. All right. So right here, this article pretty much explains how collective consciousness brings about society and how it influences. So basically, what holds us together as a collective is the social norms, the social influence, the ideologies. Okay. Now, although United States is supposed to be a melting pot, which it is, but at the same time, because it's based on Western ideology, that's what we're influenced by. So that's all we pretty much know. And as far as religion is concerned, the predominant religious practice or the common religious practice here in America is Christianity. And Christianity is pretty much the type of Christianity that is practical here is based on Catholicism. Okay. So before there was a concept of freedom of religion, it was basically Christianity. Yeah, so now you do have freedom of religion where you can practice any religion that you want, or you don't have to be religious at all, right? But based on the cultural foundation, right, and based on the ideological standpoint, it goes back to the Christian philosophy. How you don't believe me? Check this out. Let me give you an example. When you go to the courtroom, before you get on the podium, the bailiff, the first thing that bailiff gonna do is give you a Bible and tell you put your hands on it and say you gonna swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Or if you guys watch the inauguration, right? When it comes to the inauguration and the president get elected, the first thing that he has to do is put his hands on the book, and he has to make a promise, a oath that he will serve the country, right? And what that book he put his hands on, 9 times out of 10, it's the Bible. Because that's the foundation of this country, right? This country was built on the foundation of Christian ideology and belief system. Okay, but they practiced Christianity in the way they wanted to do it. They didn't practice it in the way based on its origin. Okay, but then you have various forms of Christianity that came about in this country. You had the Protestants, the what do you call them, Sebastians or Pedestrians or whatever you call them, and then you had the Anglicans, you had the Evangelists, the Methodist people, the Lutherans, Puritans. There was various form of Christian groups. As a matter of fact, let's go back. Let's talk about why many of them came over here. Because in a country like Great Britain at that time, right, a lot of them came over here into what they called the New World due to the fact that they were dealing with religious oppression. They were dealing with religious oppression. They could not practice Christianity the way they wanted to practice. So they had to practice Christianity based on the ideology. So over there in, I think over there in Britain, they were practicing Anglican religion. And many of those who were in the Christian organization, they did not agree with the Anglican ideology. So there was a problem. There was the conflict. And they end up leaving and coming to the new world just so they can start their own system and practice their own way of Christianity and do the things the way they wanted to do it. And one of them was William Penn. William Penn, who was the founder of what is now today known as Pennsylvania. And he also founded the city of Philadelphia, which means brotherly love. Okay, because it comes from the Greek word, which means brotherly love. So William Penn was given that land by King George of Great Britain because King George knew his father and his father had passed. So William Penn was dealing with so many problems over there in Great Britain, right, as far as religious oppression was concerned. And so King George said, okay, you don't want to be over here? You don't want to follow by the rule? Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll make a deal with you. I'll give you some land over here in this new world, and you can do whatever you want. So when he came over here, he got the land, and he called it Pennsylvania, which was named after him because his last name is Penn. So it became Pennsylvania. And I believe that he was a Quaker. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think he was a Quaker. Because you had a lot of Quakers came up out of Pennsylvania area. But just to basically give you that concept of the idea of the collective consciousness, right? Because of the influences around us. So you cannot just reduce it down to people who practice in religion. You just can't do that. You have to look at the cultural norms that we follow. You have to look at the social norms as well. It's a lot that goes along with that. Okay? So, I want to kind of go back a little bit. And I want to share this book with you guys. It's called The Golden Thread by Jocelyn Goodwin or Godwin. So watch this. So Jocelyn Godwin, right, speaks on the concept about the egregore. So this is chapter 6 in his book, The Power of the Egregore. Watch this. It says, like the pre-classical Greeks, the ancient Romans were extremely religious with a kind of animism in which the whole world was experienced as a soul. Each mountain and lake had its spirit. Each tree, each family, each home and hearth was inhabited by an unseen power. All activities were sacralized, ranging from the war and harvest to childbirth, philosophy, and the common acts of daily life. There was a right and wrong way to perform each action, and success or failure will follow accordingly. Okay, so the relics of this old religion were preserved with reverence all long after the once struggling city-state had swallowed up most of the known world. The guardians of the sacred tradition included the Vestal Virgins, the Sali or leaping priests, the colleges of Eggers and Arvels, and the supreme office of the Pontifex Maximus, all of whom discard their duties under the strictest rules and regulation. The destiny of the state and people was considered to be intimately bound up with these traditional institutions, which had little to fear from and little effect on the importation of foreign divinities. Now, if Plato was right, as discussed in the previous chapter, and the visible world is but a shadow of a world more real and more perfect, there is a value in a profound truth in such a religion as the old Roman had. The sacralization of the world and the conduct of life is a perpetual reminder of immaterial realities, of the priorities of the unseen over the seen. But in ancient Rome, at any rate, this did not lead to a world rejecting attitude. On the contrary, it served as a moral backbone to the state during the difficult centuries of the Republic, fostering the virtues of patriotism, family loyalty, stoicism, and self-control, for which the Romans at their best are celebrated. Now, watch this. He goes on to say, belief in a spiritual dimension to life is so closely identified today with Christianity and other religions of salvation that it is difficult for modern people to imagine it in its pagan form. But it is clear that the majority of Romans, like the Greek, invested no great hopes in the afterlife. The death of the body led inevitably to the withering away of the soul as important subject of Plato, or I mean not Plato, Pluto's and Presophe, sorry. Anyways, underground kingdoms. So individuals might come and go, but the essential survival was that of the republic, and within that of the clans and families which transcended their individual members. Each of these groups had its presiding and protecting divinities with whom proper relation were maintained by observance of the rituals. Now, just pay attention, follow me if you can follow me. If one assumes, as the old pagans did, as a modern occultist still do, that all earthly things and actions have their non-material correspondence, then there must be a science that studies these and a technology that exploits them. The best known branch of that technology is ritual, which can be religious like a mask or a sacrifice, magical like an invocation, or even secular like a rally or a possession. Most participants in rituals believe that their actions are a way of propitiating the gods in whom they put their trust. For example, the sacrificial system of the ancient world usually offered the life of an animal in order to obtain a specific benefit from the divinity, and this was as true of Judaism as it was of Greco-Roman paganism. Are y'all paying attention? Because I'm going somewhere with this. So it says the skeptic and the philosopher, however, are not content to rest with such an assumption. They may ask awkward question about who and what this divinity is, whose cooperation is so naively assumed by the sacrificer. It is not enough for them to imagine a glorified man or woman sitting up there in heaven and inhaling the fragrance of burning offering. More often than not, the result of such questioning is the disillusionment with the whole system of sacrifice, leading to a more spiritual concept or conception of the divinity and a more ethical views of human duties. As the psalmist says, thou desire not sacrifice, else would I give it. Thou delightest not in burnt offering. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise. Okay. The matter appears somewhat differently to the student of esotericism and occult philosophy. If earthly things and action have correspondence of a non-material kind, it may be that the former are not just passive with regard to the latter. The gods, whatever they may be, may need sacrifices and rituals even more than the worshiper needs the gods. Such human activities may be the main, even the only source of their reality. There is an occult concept of the Egregore, a term derived from the Greek word for watcher. It is used for an immaterial entity that watches or presides over some earthly affair or collectivity. The important point is that an egregore is augmented by human belief, ritual, and especially by sacrifice. If it is sufficiently nourished by such energies, the egregore can take on a life of its own, and appear to be an independent personal divinity with a limited power on behalf of its devotees and an unlimited appetite for their further devotion. It is then believed to be a moral god or goddess, an angel, or a demon. So, kind of skip over this a little bit. It says one may occultalize the theory of the egregore by imagining these entities to be mere energy patterns reinforced by use, analogous to the way in which patterns of neurons in the brain are reinforced and strengthened by use and mental effort. The formation of language is one example of how such a pattern may come to form the dominant matrix for our entire human experience. On the collective level, then I suggest that the old Roman gods and goddesses did have a certain limited reality, that they were kept alive by the beliefs of the people. The rituals of the priests and priestesses and psychic energy released and direct in a myriad of animal sacrifices. So long as this compact continued, the egregores watch over the city, which flourish under their protection. so so again, I ask, after just reading this, now this is dealing with the occult concept. So what I'm showing you, that it has been transitioned over. It has been transitioned over as a cultural norm and social norms. Okay. These things has transitioned over. It's practical not only within the political system, but the economy, and also in our social system. Hmm? Because here in the United States, they talk a lot about God, 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 God. And when you say the pledge of allegiance, right? You say, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, invisible, with liberty and justice for all." Right? So God is the egregore, right? But to this day, we don't really know who God exactly is, right? We don't even know if God exists or God does not exist. However, we're going by the belief system that was carried on by the Roman and Greeks, that transcended over into the Western culture. It became part of the Western culture, which became a part of us. Those who ancestors did not come from the Western society. Now, I know it sounds like I'm a little all over the place, but I'm hoping I'm making sense with what I'm saying here. So, again, if you argue that point dealing with religion, you have to argue about the social norms and the cultural norms as well, because that will fall under the concept of Egregore. It will fall under that concept because it goes beyond just religious ideology. And then, especially, and if you are atheist, you're still following under the concept of the egregore, because you're dealing with the mindset or ideology that comes from those who are European as opposed to those that are African. Because the Africans believe in some form of spiritual system. Okay? And certain Europeans did not go along with the concept of spirituality or God. So those who practice atheism or agnosticism take on the concept from those Europeans as well. But anyways, I would recommend you guys get this book. Let me post this book back up. Yeah, I think you guys should get this book. This book is very interesting. It's called The Golden Thread: The Ageless Wisdom of Western Mystery Tradition. Okay, by Jocelyn Godwin. All right, so, and this book came out in 2007, but the book is very interesting. It's very interesting. So now, now that we kind of just got past the sociology concept by dealing with the collective consciousness, now let's look at the psychology. Okay, let's go into psychology for a moment. Now, how does the egregore play a role in psychology? Well, this is where you got to deal with cognition, and cognitive psychology and cognitive science. Cognition, cognitive science, and cognitive psychology. Okay, so let me go into my notes right here. I took notes. Okay, so first of all, I put how to explain egregore in psychology and sociology sense. I already spoke on the sociology part. So it says, so also I put down the best way to explain egregore is to deal with it from a cognitive standpoint. Now, what is cognitive cognition? So according to the dictionary terminology, the cognitive is being conscious, intellectual activity, thinking, remembering, and reasoning or using language. Now, cognition, according to Wiki, is the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thoughts, experience, and the senses. Encompasses all aspects of intellectual function and process such as perception, attention, thought, imagination, intelligence, the formation of knowledge, memory and working memory, judgment and evaluation, reasoning and computation, problem solving and decision making, comprehension and production of language. Cognitive process use existing knowledge and discover new knowledge. Cognitive process use existing knowledge to discover new knowledge. Now let that sink in just for a little bit. Let it sink in just for a little bit. All right. Now let's get into what is cognitive science. So the interdisciplinary scientific study of the mind is processed with input from linguistics, psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, computer science, artificial intelligence, which we are dealing with right now. We're dealing with AI because the whole chat GPT thing going on. Anyways, and anthropology. So anthropology is the study of humanity as a whole. Okay. Cognitive science. So cognitive science, right, came out of the intellectual movement that began in the 1950s called the cognitive revolution. All right. So the cognitive revolution was an interdisciplinary study of the mind and its process. So cognitive science came out of the school of cognitive revolution. So to understand or to deal with egregore is to place it under the concept of cognition. You're dealing with the cognitive skill because you got to deal with how the mind process information, how the mind interpret things, how the mind can have influence of things. So you're dealing with the concept of thoughts, experience, and the senses, right? The perception and imagination and the intelligence and formation of knowledge. That's what you're dealing with. Okay. Now, let's go in cognitive psychology. So, it's a scientific study of mental processes such as attention, language, use, memory, perception, problem solving, creativity, and reasoning. All right. Now, Along with that, you got to deal with behavioralism. Behavioralism does play a part in this. So, behavioralism deals with the theory that human and animal behavior can be explained in terms of conditioning. Keyword what? Conditioning. Well, what are you saying, Tiffany? What I'm saying is we all have been conditioned. We all have been conditioned by society. We all have been conditioned by society. Hold on. Yeah, we all have been conditioned by society. We all have been dealing with this. Okay. So if anybody make a claim or argument that those who are religious are the only one that's been conditioned, no. We all have been conditioned. We all have been conditioned. And even when you're studying and you're learning, you're going through the process of conditioning. Even when you're studying and learning, you're going through the process of conditioning. Just one moment. Give me a moment, you guys. Just trying to make sure everything's all right with my sound. Okay, I'm back. So I had to double check, make sure my sound was good. But yes, either way, we all have been conditioned. We all been conditioned by society or by any influences around us. So whether you make a transition from being religious to becoming non-religious, you're still being conditioned. So whether you go from studying Abrahamic religion to studying other religions, you're still being conditioned. Whether you going from learning about one social norm to another social norm, you're still being conditioned. Whether you are studying cultural ideology, going from one cultural practice, right, to another cultural practice, you're still conditioned. So we all dealing with some form of conditioning. Okay? But then it goes on to say, without appeal of thoughts or feelings, and that some mental condition are best treated by altering behavior patterns. So just like when you go outside in your neighborhood, right? If you're around a bunch of criminal activities or you're around a bunch of drug addicts, whatnot, whatever take place in that society, you're going to be what influence. You're going to be conditioned because you become a product of that environment that you come from. And when you go and transition to another environment, you have to become reconditioned all over again. And this is why many of us get messed up psychologically, because we've been conditioned so much to the point that we don't know how to balance. We don't know how to deal with all the changes that goes on around us. We don't know how to adjust into being in another environment. So in the way that messes up mentally, that makes us psychologically lose our minds, because we're trying to deal with being in one environment to another environment and then going from that environment to another environment. This is one of the reasons why people don't want to change, because change means that you have to go through the process of being reconditioned. You got to go through the process of being reconditioned and start all over again. And it's not easy to let go of what you're so used to doing and make a transition to becoming a much more a better person or a different individual. It's not that easy. So some people don't adjust to change at all. They remain the same individual because that's what they've been accustomed to, and that's all they know. So they're gonna fall back on what they know, as opposed to what they don't know anything about, or if it's not something that they can relate to, or if they don't see anything that is going to benefit them, they're not going to go for the change. Okay. All right. So now we got to look at herd behavior and groupthink. So now herd behavior based on, the herd, or like a certain group of people, behave based on their common interests or what they share in common with each other as far as personality wise. So this little set of group of people right here, they gonna have their own way of acting, the way they gonna have their own little clique and how they interact with each other and how they do things with each other. While this group of people over here, they gonna have their own way of doing things, etc. So in that sense, that falls under social psychology, because you might look at the group as a whole, right? That's the sociology standpoint. You deal with the group as a whole. But then the social psychology comes in when you look at certain group of people. And then within that social psychology, you gotta look at the psychology of each individual. Sociology, you deal with the group as a whole. Social psychology, you deal with certain groups of people and their mentality and their social behavior, right? And then within that social psychology, you're dealing with psychology because you're dealing with the individual themselves, of how they behave and how they think and how they carry on. And of course, groupthink means basically you have common ideas and common thoughts that you share with individuals, basically. So, how do you think as a collective? How do you think as a group? So, now let's get into egocentrism. So now I'm going to talk about the egocentrism, social centrism, and ethnocentrism. Okay? So, egocentrism deals with the interest in oneself and concern for one's own welfare and advantage. So in egocentrism, you're focusing on yourself and what benefits you and what works for you, as opposed to other people. I'm going to show you how to start this off, okay? Egocentrism will be the first thing on that list. Then you got the concept of sociocentrism. So sociocentrism deals with the interests of one's own social group or the welfare of others. So now in sociocentrism, you're focusing on those within your group, okay? Meaning like those within your environment or those within your racial group, okay? And if you are women, you're focusing on the common interest for women, because that is a social group, or you focusing on the common interest for men as a social group. Now, here's the ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is dealing with the interest of one's own culture or one ethnic group. So, for example, as okay, let's go back. Social centrism, right? Let me just give an example. Let me break it down better. So, ethnocentrism. As an individual, let's say me, as a woman or as a human, I'm focusing on my own interests. What will be beneficial for Tiffany? What will work out for Tiffany? How will Tiffany maintain? Okay, that's the ethnocentrism. Social centrism. Social centrism. All right, so now what would be beneficial for someone that are for women? What would be beneficial for the group of women? What would be beneficial for black people? What is the interest for black people, and particularly black women? Okay, so now when I say black people, right, I'm not just talking about black people as far as just black people here in America, but black people as a general. Now here go the ethnocentrism. Okay, so what would be, now you focus on the common interest of your culture or your ethnic group, right? So now I'm focusing on the interests of African Americans and what would be best for us. What can we learn? Or what can we do? What can we do to enhance our culture as African Americans or Africans in the diaspora? What can we do to enhance our culture? All right. So ethnocentrism is very similar to social centrism because you're dealing with groups. However, ethnocentrism involves cultural practices, whereas social centrism just deals with social interaction with the groups that you belong to, right? Okay. So I'm saying these things right now. I went through all of those things to go back to the central point of this subject about the egregore. So we all have been influenced by the egregore or the egregore concept due to cultural norms, due to social norms, due to spirituality, due to economics, due to all these different things. We have been influenced. So we all been conditioned. We all are part of the collective consciousness. We all been influenced by other cultures' ideology and other cultural practices. And I always say this: your thoughts are not your original thoughts. What do I mean? Your thoughts come from other people's thoughts who got their thoughts from other people who got their thoughts from the originator that came up with these thoughts based on their perception, based on their imagination, based on their ideas, and based on their experience. Again, based on their perception, based on their imagination, based on their ideas, and based on their experience. So all of that trickle down to your thoughts. Because when you start studying on these individuals' thoughts and their ideas, it started making more sense to you, and you was able to resonate with that. So you resonated with it because you figured that was something that made more sense to you. Or you were trained by those thoughts slash conditioned by those thoughts. So you in taking ideas that came from other people. So those ideas are not just your own ideas. You'll be surprised. Somebody else had those same ideas that you have. And then you realize that both y'all ideas or both y'all thoughts come from somebody else who had those thoughts, because they came up with the ideas, they had their own perception, they had their own imagination, and they had their own experience, and you was influenced by those things. All right, so I hope the video made sense. I hope I did a good job at explaining it. So I apologize for earlier, because I did the video earlier, then I had to take it down because I was a little unprepared. But anyways, I hope you guys got something out of this. Other than that, y'all take it easy on yourselves. Y'all be safe, peace, and power, elevation. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell and share the channel. Until next time, I will talk to you guys later. So this your girl Tiffany, and I'm logging off saying deuces. And I thank y'all so much for your support. And shout out to new subscribers. Make sure you check out all the other videos that I have done. All right. So peace. Thank you.